The revolution is here. A movement of people free to live, work, and choose. We won't tell you what to think. We just demand that you think for yourself. This is Kibbe on Liberty.
Okay, welcome both of you. This is a special, let's call it an emergency meeting on a Sunday morning in Washington, D.C. Robert, you are a now friend of the show. You've been here before. Welcome back.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me on.
And Eric, you're the new guy, and we're going to get into why you're here. And you are the owner and co-founder of Big Board, which is a restaurant here in Washington, D.C., about 6 blocks from my house.
Yeah, not far at all. I walked here from there. Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
And we're talking about the District of Columbia government, in my mind, arbitrarily shutting down your restaurant because you refuse to comply with basically carding people as to their vaccination status.
That's correct, and I'm not the only restaurant in the city where that's happening. That's happening all over the city. I'm just the only restaurant in the city who said that they weren't going to do it.
Yeah. You had the audacity to say out loud that you weren't going to discriminate against people, but and somehow or another, Robert heard about your story, and you are now representing him. But before we get into that, I want to take a step back, because the last time we spoke, and I don't actually remember when exactly it was, but it was before the Supreme Court decided, made at least a preliminary decision on the OSHA Vaxport thing that the Biden administration was doing. You were involved in that, and we were speculating as to what was going to happen, but remind us what happened and the role that you played in that.
Sure, absolutely. I'm trying to think where we were in the process, but ultimately the Buckeye Institute, we represented a couple of different employers in Ohio and in Michigan who were challenging the vaccine mandate, who were concerned about what it would do to their businesses, what it would do to their employees. And so we were seeking a stay of the vaccine mandate, which applied to any employer with more than 100 employees, put them in a position where they had to either verify that their employees had been vaccinated. If they refused, then they were in a position of having to terminate them. Alternatively, they could do a testing requirement, but again, if their employees failed to meet those requirements and to be masked, then again they'd have to be terminated. All at a time where these companies were struggling just to be able to get employees, as so many employers are, to keep their operations running. So we actually, along the way, a couple of things worth noting. We were the first of the various petitioners who were challenging this mandate from the Biden administration to ask the full Sixth Circuit, all 16 judges, to hear the case. And that produced a very powerful dissent from Chief Judge Sutton, arguing that in fact the full court should have heard the case and that the stay should have stayed in place. Following that, we were the first to petition the United States Supreme Court to stay the matter, and ultimately the Supreme Court did agree with our arguments there. They went ahead and stayed, which is to say they prevented the enforcement of the mandate because the mandate itself exceeded OSHA's power. There's simply no way to read what it is that Congress authorized OSHA to do and to say that what happened here, an attempt to force 84 million Americans to provide proof of vaccination, was within OSHA's prerogatives. And it really goes, I think, as we discussed previously, to the larger issue here, which is the Biden administration. Probably the real truth of this was Ron Klain's retweet, in which he talked about this as the ultimate workaround. It was an attempt by the federal government to work around limits on federal power, using OSHA and other agencies that they also issued mandates through in order to get to individual vaccination decisions. So the Buckeye Institute was proud to have represented our clients and have succeeded in that. After the Supreme Court ruled, the Biden administration went ahead and withdrew that emergency rule. So a good victory for employers and employees nationwide.
Yeah. So Eric, you probably don't know this, but before I met you about 2.5 weeks ago, I had decided that as a resident of the District of Columbia, I would not be showing my vaccination papers to any restaurant. I belong to a gym on Capitol Hill, and I moved my gym to Virginia. And by the way, and people that watch this show, I don't talk about it a lot because it's nobody's damn business, but I am vaccinated. And then 2 weeks later, I got COVID. And now I have the robust natural immunity that Dr. Fauci promised me. So I have papers, but I am not showing them because there's a bigger principle here than whether or not it's convenient to do this. And so when my wife Terry and I found your restaurant, it was because of the tweet that you did. And I want to read this tweet. And because we were like, okay, we now know at least one restaurant in D.C. that we can go to. And this was so radical, so controversial. You tweeted on, what day is this? January 13th. As has always been the case for us, everyone is welcome. This rule applies yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll see you on January 16th. And of course, January 15th was the day that the mayor's vaccination passport, I don't know what to call it exactly. Show me your papers is how I call it. And that made you a celebrity, notorious, a political football. When you tweeted that, did you think that this was controversial to say such a thing?
I didn't think it was controversial at all, and I still don't think it's controversial at all. And I never imagined that this would become what it's become. I actually had a journalism student from Patrick Henry University who came down a little bit after that, and I was like, yeah, I think it'd be a pretty fantastic idea. Emma Purley's her name. I was like, I think it'd be a pretty fantastic idea for you to go ahead and print this in your school newspaper. And then I got a call from a producer on the Ingram Angle, and they said, do you want to go on the Ingram Angle? And I was like, wow. And before I did that, I looked at the producer, and I was like, well, I have to go ask Emma because she has exclusive rights to my story, so I'm going to make sure before I do this that she's okay with it. And she's fantastic, really, really working on her journalism, working on doing something in the future. And she was like, Eric, I don't think you should pass up this opportunity.
Yeah. So you went on Laura Ingram's show. What day was that? That was probably like the 16th, 17th, something like that.
It's got to be somewhere around there.
Close enough for this show. And that really then sort of exploded into the national debate. And one question I have for both of you, like I to this day, I don't get the politics of how sort of partisan this is. Like, to me, like I remember a day when every decent American believed that everyone welcome was just like a core bedrock principle. And you're actually describing it a little bit earlier. This is a legal principle that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years.
Oh yeah, this is essentially when we talk about in the law public accommodations. Generally speaking, the term grew up from England and the King's Highway. And when the king would grant permission for a business, an inn or a tavern or a restaurant to set up on the King's Highway to serve people, the requirement was that they had to take all comers. Another way of saying everyone is welcome. You couldn't discriminate. And that's a principle that is applied from England through to the U.S. law. So the idea that this is somehow controversial, that's how you should treat patrons, really sort of turns the legal tradition on its head.
Yeah, and it's but you were so we were over at your restaurant a couple days ago, shooting some footage, and you were telling me privately that generally speaking, the neighborhood that you have served now for a dozen years has been cool, but there's a few neighbors that won't look you in the eye anymore. And it's so political. What? How do you read that? Because you're not political.
I know I'm not political. I think everybody's going to come around. I do. I don't think that anything that's there is political. Welcoming everybody is the right way to do things. But it's been a long 2 years for some people. And when you are inundated with all of this information that tells you, hey, bars and restaurants may not be your best place to go right now, which I don't believe is true at all. Sometimes it takes people a little bit of time to get to their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And it's not, we didn't do anything. We didn't say that you can't wear a mask. We didn't say that you can't be vaccinated and come in. I didn't say to my staff, you don't have a job if you can't wear a mask. Some of my staff wore masks, and some of them didn't. It was their choice. And same for the customers. We didn't berate you if you came in. We just tried to make you comfortable. We would actually we had customers come in who were like, they're too close. We've got 2 different floors. We would sit them upstairs when we weren't staffed for it and let them sit all by themselves if that was where they wanted to be, and that made them comfortable.
So you mentioned 2 years, and I think it's worth reiterating. As a restaurant owner, it's been a long 2 years because you've been I don't remember the history right now, but the District of Columbia has been fairly aggressive in terms of locking down gatherings multiple times, as I recall, over the last 2 years. As a restaurant owner, how have you survived?
One, the neighborhood. They would come in whatever our conditions were. So when we were only allowed to be a carryout, which was 3 months in D.C., they would come in and order carryout food, and they would buy to-go drinks from us. And then when we were able to sit 50% capacity for most of last summer of 2020, people would come in and find a chair and sit. And my staff came into work, and they kept coming with all of the news and all of the things that you heard. They came in, and yeah, I'm sure they were a little bit worried at times, but they just kept on coming into work. How we made it beyond that, I have no idea. The staff and the people.
Tenacity. So Robert, I was asking you on the last show, and kind of complaining as a resident of the District of Columbia, I barely knew who Muriel Bowser was as my mayor until lockdowns happened. And maybe that makes me a bad citizen, I don't know, but I happen to believe that I'd rather live in a place where I don't necessarily need to know who the politicians are. I could guess what her political affiliation is because everybody's a Democrat in D.C., but I was asking you, like, how does she have the power to do this? How does a mayor or a governor or a president, I don't care who, which party, like, you're just going to arbitrarily decide that some people can't do their business?
So, this arises like it has in a number of other places from the use of emergency powers. And I really think it gets to the core of Eric's case. We've now been in the District of Columbia in a 2-year state of emergency. 2 years. That's no longer a state of emergency. That's a full term of Congress. And so by virtue of having these continual renewals of emergency orders, essentially what the city has done is they've blocked any substantive review of these requirements. So first of all, D.C. law under the Home Rule Act, ordinarily when a law passes, there's a 30-day period before it goes into effect, which allows Congress to review it and, if they wish to, override it through a joint resolution. That requirement doesn't apply for emergency laws. And so for the past 2 years, all of these orders have been insulated from any review by Congress. Obviously, that's pretty important when you're dealing with the sorts of orders that we're talking about that potentially close down, put vaccination record requirements to businesses within the federal district where Congress is doing its business, where people are coming to visit their representatives. The second thing that they did with these orders is they literally closed the courthouse doors. When Eric got his suspension, his license suspension, it made clear on the bottom of the order, referencing D.C. law, that he was not allowed to appeal in court until the emergency ended. Literally, the courthouse doors are closed. This fundamentally violates basic principles of due process, and this attempt to sort of create almost a law-free zone in which these emergency orders are able to operate without any substantive check, either by Congress or by the courts.
So Eric, you sent the tweet, heard around the world, and how soon before you got a response from the government? As I recall the story, suddenly regulators started knocking on your door. Is that a fair characterization?
That's very fair characterization. If I sent that tweet on the morning of January 13th, on the evening of January 14th, the government liquor board agents, or ABRA in D.C., was there to visit me.
By the way, I'm shocked. As someone that lives in the district, our government is not that efficient. But that's some tight turnaround. They showed up the next day.
Yeah, the 15th, and then, or the 14th, the 15th. The 16th it snowed in D.C., so they didn't show up, and the 17th was a national holiday, so they didn't show up on the 17th. But then the 18th, the 19th, the 20th, the 21st, they were very, very, very efficient in shutting me down.
Yeah, but they like, it was, for a bit, it was a drip, drip, drip. Like, did you get like minor infractions that they wrote you up for, or they were just there to remind you that they were in charge?
So the way that it worked was they came in, hey, this is going into effect tomorrow on January 14th. We're going to give you a warning for your staff not wearing masks. And it was kind of funny. They would come in, and I'd look just like I am now, and they'd ask me, are you wearing a mask? And I just didn't know how to answer the question. You have eyes.
Yeah, it seemed like an obvious. Yeah.
And then on the 15th, they came in and they said, hey, this is you have to do this. So today we're going to give you a formal written warning, and for not checking vaccine, we're going to give you a verbal warning. And then on the 16th, the agent of ABRA at the DC Liquor Board came in, and he just straight out yelled at me. And he said, I don't think you understand this. The mayor knows about this. This is important. You're not doing this, and you're not doing this. And I said, well, thank you very much for coming by. About 3 hours later, he came back and said, hey, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm just doing my job. I said, okay. But on the slow drip, 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 yeah, it's slow drip, 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 but it's every day. So
yeah,
every day it's new tasks that they've given me beyond the stuff that I just have to do to keep the restaurant open.
Yeah. And you ultimately lost your liquor license. How far after the tweet?
So the tweet, 14 days after the tweet.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks. And I've been down there for 10 years. The government agencies came to visit my restaurant more in that 2 weeks than they did in the previous 10 years combined.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, they just shut you down. It happened to be the first night that I was there with Terry and Logan, because, as I said, I was not going to any restaurants that were requiring me to show my papers. And I'm sure there's other places I could go in D.C. I just don't know where they are, and I don't want to go through that process.
If I knew of any place where that was the case, I most certainly would not say it out loud.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you don't want to bring down this reign of hellfire that you've experienced, but we were there and there was a bunch of people there, which turned out to be the last night you were legally allowed to serve food.
And it was kind of funny because when they came in, so this is after the liquor license has been removed, and when they removed the liquor license, they actually sent the agent down who was doing it with a police officer. And I was like, why do you guys have a police officer? You're more than welcome to come in. And I looked at the police officer like, you're more than welcome to come in too. There's not going to be any problems. 3 days later, because even without a liquor license, we were busy on Friday, we were busy on Saturday, we were busy on Sunday. On Monday, we closed down so that I could fix the things that the health department asked me to do. I had to do some drywall repair, fix some plumbing, all stuff that was within my capabilities of doing. And then Tuesday, when the health department came in and ultimately shut us down, the first thing that they showed me was, hey, we've already got the paper that's going to shut you down that we're going to tape on your front door. Then they went and did their inspection and were like, oh, you fixed everything. And
so you're saying it was perhaps premeditated.
I believe it was preordained.
Yeah. So one of the ironies or whatever of this, Robert, is that this vaccine mandate, and I have a theory as to why the mayor backed down so quickly, but this whole mandate paradigm only lasted about a month. And then she immediately pulled it back. And I suspect it was because it was probably damaging DC small businesses, and she was probably getting a lot of pushback for that. We don't know why. She didn't say. Everything that she has done, she claims, is part of the science, but nothing changed in terms of the data. How is he still closed, even though there is no longer a vaccine mandate in place?
That is a great question. Because as when you were talking to him earlier, you also noted there's suffice it to say there's reason to believe that his was not the only restaurant that at least wasn't consistently enforcing the rules. The difference was he actually had the courage to say something about it, and because of that, his restaurant was closed down. And I use the word courage advisedly there. Professor David Azarad from Hillsdale College refers to courage as being being the bold and principled defiance of the lies of our age. And I think that describes Eric's approach. He was willing to stand up, and once again, without getting into sort of a great deal of detail, just push back against the idea that we should be telling people that they can't come in if they don't have their papers, if they don't have their vaccination card. And so now that that the city has reversed course, nonetheless, he is still closed. So that, quite frankly, is where the Buckeye Institute has come in to represent him. We are in the process of seeing if we can get D.C. government to come to their senses, and if they don't, we'll see them in court.
By the way, I meant to offer my viewers a challenge, and there would have been like free gifts and prizes if people could figure out, without me introducing you to, who the lawyer was and who the bartender was. I mean, do you sleep in that suit, really?
On a good night, yeah.
Actually, we should have brought it up, but people will see it when we release another video we're working on. But I saw a picture of you in your dress whites, shaking hands with, I suppose it was Vice President Al Gore, right?
Vice President Al Gore at the time, yes.
So
yes.
You are a veteran. And tell us a little bit, just a quick history of how you served your country.
So I'm Naval Academy graduate. 1997 is when I graduated. I just made a lot of my classmates really happy by saying 1997 on the air. From there, I went and joined the Navy Submarine Force, and I was on the USS Olympia out of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Did 2 Western Pacific deployments. On my second deployment, we deployed on July 3rd of 2001 because there's no way we could ever possibly celebrate a July 4th and deployed on the 5th. That's the wisdom of the Navy. And if you all remember, in September of that year, some really terrible stuff happened, and we were out there. After that, I want to say we did 57 days underway, followed by a 4-hour stopover to reload food and 26 more. It was very, very, very interesting times.
I can't imagine spending that, and I've been on some of these submarines, but I can't imagine spending, would you say, 57 days?
57 days and followed by 26, I want to say.
That's intense.
It's weird because you don't live in the same world that people live in.
Yeah.
you don't get emails for 3 months. You don't know what's going on in the outside world. I didn't see a plane flying into the World Trade Center until October of 2001. I still have the newspapers that people sent me at my house that came to us when we pulled into port. And normally when you pull into port, everybody wants to get off the submarine as fast as they can. When we pulled in after September 11, nobody left because there was so much mail that had come for us and so many videos that everybody just sat down and put the VHS in and watched because we had no idea. We hadn't seen any of it.
You just dated yourself. Do we need to explain to people what a VHS tape is? But we'll do another show on that.
I was going to say, given the amount of vinyl that you have,
yeah, I suspect that if we start naming graduation dates, I'm going to lose this test of nostalgia. But so you served your country. Fast forward to you and I believe your brother decided to open a bar.
And just like everybody when they're 21 and they go out to a bar, I decided at that point I wanted to open up my own bar because I loved it. And I was just the one who was crazy enough to follow through on the plan to continue saving and doing it. And my brother had moved out.
Why when you were 21, like what was it about a bar that was so romantic to you that you're like, I'm going to do this someday?
I don't know. The feeling of camaraderie, the people that were there, community. Yeah. And I don't know, I grew up watching Cheers.
Yeah.
And I always loved the idea of a place where everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
And my brother had the vision to come to Northeast Washington, D.C. well before it looked like it does now. And I didn't believe him. I didn't believe him that Northeast D.C. would be a good place to open up a bar. I was completely wrong. It's a fantastic place. It is.
And so you opened, what, about 10 years ago?
Yeah, October of 2011. So a little bit more than 10 years.
I feel like your bar, as a beer geek, if people watch this show, they know that I obsess about beer, but I feel like you were sort of one of the OG bars that said, we're going to have a lot of craft beer on tap.
Yeah, and all the way from the beginning, we have had a lot of craft beer from New Belgium, from Dogfish Head, from all of these great breweries that are there, big ones, small ones, DC Brau, the ones that are in. And what we try to do is you go to a lot of places and all they have are IPAs. They've got 15 different IPAs that you can select. And I'd like to say, and we're not the forerunners of it or the first doing it, but we have always had a good balance where you can get a good stout, you can get a good sour, you can get a pale ale, you can get an IPA, you can get a hazy IPA, all of the different styles of beers that are out there.
And this is something worth fighting for.
That is absolutely true.
So where are we right now? Like, he's still shut down. I can't get at that beer selection. What's going to happen next, and how do we get a little bit of freedom back here in the District of Columbia?
So again, for most other restaurants, if you go in, the vaccine mandate has been lifted. You can go into DC restaurants now, and you don't have to show your vaccine card. And yet he remains closed. The mask mandate is supposed to be lifted at the end of this month, so beginning, I believe, March 1st. That should also be lifted. But nonetheless, he remains closed. So we have sent a demand letter to the city and given them 2 business days. We're talking now during a holiday weekend, but once the city reopens, to go ahead and reply to our demand that his licenses be reinstated immediately and that he be able to reopen. And as I said, I would hope, given the fact that they've abandoned this policy, that they would go ahead and come to their senses and go and reinstate his ability to run his business. If not, then we'll go ahead and, as I've said before, see them in court.
Yeah. So one thing I forgot to mention, one of the things you told me that night that we were there, and it accidentally turned into a gathering for Senator Rand Paul and his staff and Congressman Thomas Massey, and there was like 3 or 4 other congressmen there, I think. and at least for some of them, they had quit the Capitol Hill Club for the same reason that I wouldn't go to a restaurant. They didn't want to show vaccination papers just for the privilege of going into a restaurant. So they had gathered at your place. It was perhaps the only time in my life that I was excited to be at a dry bar. Thank you, Mayor Bowser. But one of the things you said that night that seems so obvious, but I hadn't really thought of it, is like, my staff is here to serve customers. I don't have the resources or the people to start checking people's health status.
And that's absolutely true. One, it's none of my business. Two, it's not my job. And three, people make a lot of false equivalencies, and they're like, you have to check everybody's ID. So why can't you do this also? I don't have to check everybody's ID every time they walk through the door. If you think I'm carding a 65-year-old when they come in to order a beer from me, I'm not, because I'm not liable. If you're of age and I don't check your ID, I'm not liable that I gave you a beer. The way that the mandate was written in D.C. was such that my neighbor, who I would know, who I know what they drink, I know what they eat, I know their kids' names, every single time they walked through the door, I was required to check their vaccination card and their ID every single time without failure. That's, if I can remember what you drink and what your kids' names are, I could certainly remember that I had done that. The policy itself is apparent, but it just didn't make any sense.
Yeah. You've another thing that you've done that would strike some people as unusual is that you've tried to keep your team on the payroll, even though you're not allowed to earn revenue. Why are you doing that?
Well, because they've been my team and my friends for 10 years. A lot of them have been down there for all of this time. And unlike, they want to work. They really, really, really want to work. They want to do something. And I wish I could show it to you. But when they come down and we're doing the little bits of community service that we're doing right now, they're excited and they're happy. And they want to go out because they want the neighborhood to be a better place. And they don't want to sit in their house and just, so I'm not the federal government. I'm not going to give you a check to stay home. You still got to come into work and do some stuff. It gives them a sense of, my best guess, a sense of community and a sense of pride because they're still doing something. For the people who worked at home, who their job didn't change when everybody got locked down and everything, I don't think you understand how crushing that was for those of us who couldn't go to work, for the people that I had to say, I don't have any work for you, and how mentally hard that is to do, to all of a sudden be told you don't have a purpose, just sit home and collect money. I don't know. I'm just so happy that they're here now, after enduring that for all this time, that I wouldn't want to leave them without an option to have something to do.
So if people are watching this and they want to help you get through this, how can they donate to keep supporting your team?
To keep supporting the team, we've got a couple different methods we can do it. One is givesendgo.com/everyoneiswelcome. And the second one is GoFundMe. And if you look GoFundMe for the big board, you'll be able to find it there. If you're wondering where this money's going, my rent and utilities are $15,000 every month. I have to keep that pay and going. And yesterday, after only one day of work where we were allowed to make money, I spent $25,000 on payroll for my staff. My paycheck was not in there.
Yeah. And your Twitter, if you want to find both of these, you can find it on the pinned tweet on your Twitter account, which is @thebigboarddc.
Thank you.
And for those who want to follow the case, if you go to buckeyeinstitute.org, we've got details about the case, including And if you go, should be the demand letter, as well as some information about Eric's story and what brought him to this point.
And a wild prediction: when you're free and open again, I think that Buckeye and Free the People are going to buy a couple rounds of beers.
I think that is a good prediction.
Yeah. Here's to being free to do your work.
Thank you. And there's one more thing that I thought I'd say. Robert talked about courage, and I don't know if you guys realize this, but this is also very courageous on Robert's part. I talked with a lot of lawyers who said, "Oh, I don't think we can do something in D.C. I don't think this is a good place. I'd rather try this case in some other jurisdiction." I can't thank you enough, Robert, for doing this. It's unbelievable. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. I have the best job in the world. I get to sue the government when they overstep their bounds and when they end up infringing on the rights of individuals. And I get to represent good people like Eric, represent the good guys in these situations. So no one wants a burger with a side of government overreach, and I want to make sure that Eric's able to provide that to his customers.
Yeah, and for the first time in my life, I will wash that burger down with a craft beer at the big board. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that show, make sure that you like and subscribe. Click the little bell so that you get notifications. And if you consume this via podcast, go wherever you want to go. We're everywhere. Kibbe on Liberty. The revolution starts now.